What was your cagiest move as a parent? Mine is inside. My daughter and I went to the Chinese buffet almost every Sunday for years, and, at least until she was in school learning to read, she oddly got the same cookie fortune every time. Listen to your father, for he is a wise man. Note to self, get custom fortune cookies for my kid. When I was a little kid, me and my brother refused to eat carrots because we didn't like them. Next time my parents included carrots in a meal, they told us they weren't carrots but a new vegetable called oranjabooms. We freaking loved oranjabooms. Kids are dumb. Haha. Oranjaboom is a brand of Dutch beer. My mom recently told me that my dad used to purposefully drop change on the ground so that I could find it. I used to lose my crap over finding change. That can be dangerous in the wrong hands. I once found 5C and, upon recognizing that money can be exchanged for goods and services, I sprinted up to the corner shop, found the biggest bag of candy I could carry, slammed it down on the counter along with the 5C coin. The shopkeeper was quite bemused. I missed my turn one day in the car. My daughter was about 3 and heard me say "damn it" under my breath. She then proceeded to spend the next 5 minutes repeating the word over and over until I told her she was saying it wrong. It was actually pronounced "dargit." Telling my kids, before they could read, that various signs at stores said no crying, yelling or screaming aloud. Actually things like President's Day sale or service center this way. Somehow having it be a store rule was more effective than if I simply told them not to misbehave. If they started acting up, I just remind them, remember the sign? I work at a daycare, and this reminds me of a trick a mother used on her 2-year-old. When the little girl starts crying, the mother gives her a look of surprise and says, "Baby, it's Tuesday. There's no crying on Tuesdays. It's a rule." The little girl considers this for a moment, and then sniffs a little. Okay. I have one specific memory as a kid of me being extremely peeved at my mom for yelling at me or something. So I packed up a sleeping bag with all my possessions I treasured at the time, stuffed animals and such, and tried walking out the door. My mom asked me what I was doing and I said running away, and she said, "Oh good, I'll help you." So she loaded me and my stuff in the car, drove to a random parking lot and then said, "There, get out." I didn't budge. My mom would offer to pack a snack, and I am not sure, but I think as I was leaving she would remind me I was not allowed to cross the street. Limited my escape somewhat. When I was little, I never ate broccoli. Then one day the broccoli had melted Munster cheese on top. Awesome. I love cheese. I ate up the cheesy broccoli for a week or two. Then the cheese went away as suddenly as it appeared. I thought, that's odd. For about another week I would melt the cheese on the broccoli in the microwave for myself. Then that got to be a hassle, and the broccoli really tasted fine without it, so I stopped. Presto, I had started eating broccoli. It wasn't until years later that I realized that had been the plan all along. In my parents' house it is common to customize your dinner plate this way, including raiding the fridge for other food or doing additional prep work, like slicing cheese. Also, no one starts eating or sits down at the same time. Customization time starts when the main dinner is cooked, and each person starts eating whenever their customizations are done. I didn't realize how unusual this was until the first time I brought a girlfriend home to visit and it freaked her the frick out. I wouldn't eat cooked vegetables. I still would rather not. Less prep and nice crunchy vegetables. But I loved to think broccoli were trees, so I would try to stand them up and pretend to be a giraffe. Kind of a strange story, I know, but you reminded me of it. When my kids were toddlers, I was traveling on business and happened to be in the hometown of a good friend. Call him Bob. I took Bob, his wife, who I didn't know very well, and their baby out to dinner in my rental car. On the way there, the baby, as they often do, liked the feeling of the moving car and didn't like it when the car stopped. So he would cry every time we came up to a stoplight. The wife was in new mom mode and would seriously lose it whenever the baby cried. Somehow, she didn't catch on to the relation between the crying and the car. To try to lighten the mood, I told her he'll stop in just a minute. She, of course, utterly went off on me, which naturally caused her baby to cry all the more. How do I know what her baby needs? Where do I get off telling her what her baby is going to do? As a man, I can't possibly have the sacred bond between a mother and her baby, etc., etc. So for the rest of the drive, I would say start crying every time we came to a stop, and stop crying every time we started up again, and he would. Freaked her right the frick out. I think she thought I was using witchcraft, or had occult baby psychic powers, or something. The mom sounds obnoxious. This is still in the planning phase, but hopefully by the end of the summer our plan will come together. We recently found a secret room in our house. Cool. It's actually a pocket of attic space that you access through a panel in the back of the upstairs hall closet. It's a big space 17 x 12 feet with a steep vaulted ceiling and it runs right behind my son's room. We didn't tell him about it. Our plan is to send him to his grandparents' house one weekend so that we can turn the space into a video game room. We have to put down a floor and hang drywall or some other wall treatment. AC and cable are already running to the general area so it will have that. 2. The kicker is that we are going to put a full-size door to it from his room. When he gets home we're just going to sit back and wait for him to discover it. Luckiest 8-year-old ever. Stop. Do not put in a full-sized door. Rather, put in a hidden door, or an 8-year-old sized door. One only he and his friends will know about, be able to use. That will be really cool. Whenever my parents wanted me to go to bed they would tell me, would you like to go to bed now, or in 5 minutes? Needless to say, I opted for the 5 minutes. Once that was up, they could just force me to go to bed and claim that I chose to. Democracy in action. My dad, not a Redditor, is really classy. One time he was making lunch for me and asked how I wanted my sandwich cut. I said it didn't matter and rode off to school. Several hours later during lunch I pull out my sandwich and to my surprise there is a hole cut in the middle of it. He was so proud of himself. No matter what I told my mom, she made a good effort to cut the sandwich that way. One time she cut it into the shape of an elephant. Whenever my dad would fart he would blame it on the barking spiders. 5-year-old me would spend a good 10 minutes looking for these rare creatures. He still laughs at me and my siblings for this. When my dad farted in the car, he yells and freaks out because he just ran over a duck. My younger brother and sister would hysterically cry and look out the back window. Me and my mom would sit there silently cracking up while my dad pulled a charade. He honestly pulled it off at least a dozen times. Not a parent, but a nanny. Whenever I pick the kids up from school and they're super hyper, the minute we get home it's hey, the weather is awesome today. Can you go show me how you do that thing where you climb to the top of the tree? One tree climb turns into 20, and while I'm cooking dinner, they are wearing themselves out big time. By the time food is ready, they are exhausted and ready to head to bed. I'm not sure your username supports your career choice. My son is in his whining phase at the moment. Anything, even a small scrape and he's all it hurts. I need a boo-boo sticker, when will it be better etc etc. This can go on for about half an hour. Now, I simply ask him is it so bad we have to amputate? Shuts him up every time. Not mine, but my family's. In the summer, me and my gaggle of cousins, just love to go over to my grandparents' house to go swimming. And while just about everything else occasionally got shot down, I don't think anyone ever refused to take the kids swimming, at least while the weather was nice. In fact, they'd all encourage it, with the adults taking turns watching the kids, even calling each other to get more kids over, and hurling pool toys and otherwise making sure we had a grand old time. And it was really weird that pretty much every time we wanted to go swimming, we always got to, it wasn't until many years later that it finally clicked. I'd started exercising regularly in the gym I went to had a pool. I hopped in and did some laps and as I was sitting there afterwards, completely exhausted, I realized swimming is freaking tiring. And then I thought about all those times we'd been swimming and after we spent most of the day splashing around and swimming and whatnot, I remembered we were usually pretty spent and spent the rest of the day either napping or lying in front of the TV, too exhausted to start crap. And then it clicked. They didn't so much care if we had fun, they found an easy, efficient way to burn off all our rambunctious energy under the guise of letting us do what we wanted and have fun. It was all a conspiracy. This is exactly why I take my 3-year-old to the park now. He just runs around in the sun like a chicken with his head cut off for an hour and then by the time we get home he's ready to curl up and go to sleep for a while. When the kids were about 8 and 10, they started to doubt the whole Santa Claus thing. That Christmas Eve, I took a pair of boots and rubbed them in the ashes of our fireplace and stamped boot prints to the tree and back to the fireplace. They were stunned. Got a couple more years out of them with it. Suckers. My mom used the whole do unto others shtick. I was a biter when I was little, and to get me to stop, she took me to my room one day and bit me hard on the arm. In my tears of anguish she says that's what it's like to be bit, and left the room. Sadly, it took 2 more occasions of her biting back before I stopped biting altogether. With my preschoolers, I use the phrase "you made the choice" quite often when using threats discipline. For example, you are making the choice to yell during center time, so you are making the choice to sit down while your friends are playing outside, versus "stop yelling or else I'll take away your recess time." It also works well when you're disciplining children for past events. I'm sorry, but you made the choice to hit your friend. It sounds trite, but once you put the action on them, they tend not to argue much. I thought I was pretty smart using this tactic, but it doesn't work on my kids at all. My son, especially, continues to do stuff that gets him in trouble, and just says matter of fact that he must be stupid for continuing to make these choices. He's 8. New Year's Eve, son and daughter would always want to stay up for the New Year's but never make it. They would always fall asleep, plus it would ruin any plans we would have for the evening. We came up with the idea to set the clock ahead 4 hours. We would blow noisemakers and bust balloons at midnight, actually 8 PM, and put them in bed by 1 AM. 9 PM, once asleep, grab a babysitter and go out for the real New Year's. Of course our neighbors thought we were idiots. I'm writing this one down for when my daughter gets older. I'm far too young to be a parent, but I remember one time when I was really little we went on a road trip to Jasper, Rocky Mountains. I begged and begged to take a rock home, so my mom dropped this line on me: "Honey, if everyone took a rock home with them there would be no mountains left." Even though I was heartbroken about having to put the rock back, I understood the severity of taking rocks away from mountains and complied reluctantly. TLDR. A totally smooth planet would suck. Your mom talked you out of bringing home a rock. A rock. She must be one heck of a lawyer. When my mom wanted my brother and I to go to bed, she would say last one up the stairs is a dirty sock, and the 3 of us would race to get upstairs. She lost the race 95% of the time. Surprise. And once my brother's glasses were broken in the process. In her mind, I'm sure it was worth it to get us to go to bed so quickly. On Christmas Eve, we would get to open one gift, and it always turned out to be pajamas. We would then be told to go try on our new PJs to show grandma and grandpa. After the fashion show, we went straight to bed. As the years go by, more of these tricks come out of the woodwork. Whenever I was upset and crying as a child, my parents would come try to comfort me by saying, "If you laugh and cry at the same time, you'll grow hairs in your kilo." That's what we called the anus. But that's another story, which of course made me laugh. I have butt hair now, but at least I cheered up. I prefer the term butt beard. When I was little, we had an old station wagon with a middle seat in the front. One time, at around 6, I realized that only a radio in front of me, as opposed to an airbag. So I asked my dad what would happen in the case of a car accident. His way of assuaging my fears was to explain to me that the radio would let an extremely loud blast of sound that would render me totally deaf for the rest of my life. But at least you'll still be alive. God, I'm trolling dads. TLDR. When I was scared of dying in car accident, dad told me I'd be okay. Permanently deaf. That is not cagey. That's freaking awesome. You realized your progeny was having an issue. You addressed it, without in any way demeaning him, or showing him up. All without him ever expressly requesting assistance. Probably has no idea that you set him up like that. I say again, awesome. That is not cagey. More like crafty. I have 2 dessert stories about my dad. There are 4 of us, and when it was time for ice cream he'd always shout out smallest first, which would pee me off because I was the oldest and wanted my ice cream first. After a few weeks of sulking after this happened, he told me that he wasn't referring to age, but the size of the portion. One night he told us before dinner that he had a new dessert for us to try, and it was called zilch. My siblings and I were positively ecstatic that we were going to have zilch for dessert. After dinner he gave us an empty bowl and told us to enjoy zilch. We didn't believe him, but he made us look up zilch in the dictionary and we all started crying. He said learning vocabulary was important and that if we read for half an hour we'd get dessert, which was goody goody gumdrops ice cream. Yum. So we read pretty intensely. My lad was showing signs of an unhealthy competitive streak and it was starting to affect him socially and personally. Sometimes he would even hit himself in the head for making an error. He hated losing so much that he would withdraw from most kinds of competitive situations. For example, although he was exceptionally bright, he would never raise his hand in school for fear of having the wrong answer. My solution was to convince him that there was such a thing as a wozer, a winner-loser, and that all people are in fact wozers, though most of us don't realize it. He was dubious at first, but then I defied him to show me any one person who always won or always lost at everything. Putting a name to this concept made it easy for him to retain it and eventually apply it to his own life. He is still very competitive, but he is no longer so hard on himself when he loses. Sometimes, he still needs a little strategic reminder that we are all wozers, but then again, who doesn't? Once driving past a do not enter sign, my son pointed it out and told me we weren't allowed to go in this way. I blurted out. I talked to the guy and he said it was cool, it worked like a charm, and I got to reuse it a few times after that. I took my sons on vacation to California when they were little boys. One of my sons, who is a Redditor on here now, hated peas, detested them, would not eat them. We stopped at a diner on Route 66 and had lunch. We ordered soup for the kids. My son grimaced at the soup because it had peas in it. I informed him, with a knowing smile, that these were California peas. That meant they were edible and delicious. He looked at me, believed me, and ate the soup. He was 7. He is now 31. Hey Mike, you ate the peas. Ha 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 ha. Frick you, Dad. I'm in treatment now. I'm going to cheat and recount my mum's awesome moment. I was suspicious of the tooth fairy, and so decided to test things. I took my tooth, in its folded tissue, and after going to sleep took it out from under my pillow, where mum and I had placed it, and put it in my pocket instead. Dun dun da. The next morning, I wake up, cagily reach into my pocket, find my gold coin wrapped up instead of the tooth and, in awe, say to mum, the tooth fairy's real. Mum smiles and nods. Years later, mum recounted the other side of this story. She sneaks into my room in the dark, feels under my pillow, doesn't find the tooth. She checks down the side of the bed, on the floor, nothing. Finally, in desperation, she picks me up and puts me into her bed, shuts my door, turns the light on and proceeds to tear my bed apart looking for it. Finally, she gets suspicious. She looks in my drawer, through my bedside shelf, takes down all my books, nothing. Finally, she thinks if I was testing the tooth fairy, where would I hide my tooth? She returns to me, reaches into my pocket, finds the tooth and makes the appropriate rage comic face, remakes my bed, tidies up my whole room, puts me back, and finally, exhausted but incredibly smug, goes to sleep, looking forward to my face in the morning. Man, and I thought the tooth fairy was really clever when she gave me exactly how much my mother said it would cost to rent The Return of Jafar. Your mother was a dang good tooth fairy. My mum admitted that she told my older brother that the ice cream van was just a van that drove around playing music for the neighborhood and didn't actually sell ice cream. Oh, that's the onion van. I've raised my babies right. Eldest just emailed me to alert me to this thread. Some of my favorite mom hacks through the years. I'll make you a deal. You can go with me into this store if you can keep your hands in your pockets the whole time, to take care of attractive targets like breakable things or beads and shiny objects. My kids were part crow for misbehavior in stores. It's okay, honey. We'll just put all the things in the cart back where they belong and come back when you're a little older. This only works with a heavy dose of quiet wistfulness. Anger ruins it completely and the child understands that calmness in stores is the norm. To clear the room when parents want privacy. Honey, wanna have sex on the couch? The kids are here and could learn some things. You have to know that we had strange senses of humor. I'm sorry, the ignition won't work if all the seatbelts aren't correctly fastened. For afternoon nap time, you don't have to go to sleep. Just close your eyes and listen to one song. I used records of folk songs and sang some of them with my guitar. At bedtime, you don't have to go to sleep, but you do have to stay under the covers. Book? Sure, that's a great idea. Yes, they all turned out to be great readers. Cure for boredom. Yay. I have a list of chores for you. I was just waiting for you to ask for them. Or would you rather go outside and play? This was the old days before people kept TV on all day and before the invention of video games. It's a rule that you have to write a thank you note before you play with a birthday Christmas present. I never came up with a good system for sharing housework, though. To this day they howl when someone mentions job charts. I invented 2-minute account and they were always a family joke. They also tell me that they were well into HS before they realized that everyone didn't play art show, put on a play, mud pie marathon, etc. with their mothers. Fun times. When I was very young, my mother would make my 2 brothers and I compete in a staying quiet game for $1. We used to all lie on the floor for 15-30 minutes at a time motionless while she'd sit on the couch reading some mystery novel. Sometimes we'd fall asleep. My dad was always upset that we'd drink all the juice in the house while he was out at work, so he took a carton of orange juice and labeled it warning bleach. Do not drink in a black marker. My brothers and I fell for it. I didn't stop and realize that there was no reason to put bleach in the fridge for almost a year after he started doing this. I'm not a parent, but here's one of my mom's golden tricks from my childhood. Mom hated balloons. I loved balloons and I was an adorable kid, so I always wound up getting balloons at those TGIF type restaurants. Mom would kindly let me get them. We would walk outside, and then it would always come. She told me that balloons lived on the moon, that the moon was their home, and that I should be nice and let the balloon go so it could go back to its family and live happily ever after. Fell for it every time. And candy wrappers live in Atlantis, so throw them in the river. My mom would be eating ice cream, and it looked really good, so I asked what it was and if I could have some. She called it brown mommy medicine. Since I was not a mommy, I knew I couldn't have any. My high school math teacher once told me a similar story where he called his beer daddy soda. With our 3-year-old, at dinner time, serving something new. Have we had this dinner before? Yes, we've had it lots. You really love this dinner. Why my favorite. My cousin told me this story about my dad. My dad was the first from his family to leave Pakistan and over to America. He spent his whole life supporting his siblings as well. When my cousin moved to the States, he had no idea how to go about doing his thing. He struggled for a few years before finally coming to my dad for assistance in starting a business. My dad said he couldn't spare the expense in helping out as he had to feed his own family. He offered to put my cousin in touch with a friend, let's call him Bob, who would be able to offer a loan. Fast forward a few years, the business is doing well and my cousin finally paid off his debt. When he thanked the Bob in the end, Bob told my cousin that the money wasn't his to loan out. Turned out, my dad loaned the funds to cousin through Bob. He didn't want my cousin to think he was indebted to anyone in the family or to try and take advantage. When I was little, I had a candy bar for some reason and I didn't want to share with my mom when she asked for a piece. She said okay, but I'm going to disappear and I still wouldn't give her any. So she walked off and freaking disappeared for like an hour. I was crying and running around the house trying to find where she went. I still don't know to this day, but rest assured, from that day on, I gave that bee some candy. Bee loved candy. When I was little, I had a candy bar for some reason. Bulls, I demand to know the reason. That isn't the kind of thing that you just conveniently forget. We told our children that the world was black and white up until about 1965. Actually, we lied to them a lot and then told them that we were lying and how it could be discerned that they were lies so as to teach them critical thinking skills. Curiously, only one of them is savvy, the other is still utterly gullible. I'm going to wait until 3D television is commonplace before I have children, then tell my kids the world was 2D up until about 2011. I used to spell my kids' names and alphabets in their cereal bowl when they were 4 or 5 and pretend I knew nothing about it. Not a parent, but figured I would share anyway. I worked in a program for kids. Juvenile detention meets outward bound, I suppose. Anyway, with 40 odd kids in a program, you could never keep tabs on the stuff they would be up to, and of course they would perpetually break the rules, etc. So, I always told them that I would never bother asking a question if I did not already know the answer. Once every few weeks I would randomly grab a kid and drag him into my office, sit him down, look P, give him a good amount of time to stew and think he was in trouble, and then just ask, okay, tell me what the heck happened. He would start to stutter and I would remind him, boy, don't waste my time. You know I am not going to ask you a question I don't already know the answer to. You wanna come clean or would you prefer me to tell you what you did? 100% of the time, within at least the last week, they were up to some crap. And every time they would spew how they broke curfew, or they took something that was contraband or whatever, I would grill them and give them heck, and send them on their way. Never really consequence them because the whole goal was to make them think I knew everything, all knowing, all seeing. Fun part was, I didn't know crap. You'll all love hate this one. My daughter was about 7 or 8 and we had just walked home from the nearby 7-Eleven with Slurpees in our hand. We needed to get in the car to head to her soccer practice, so I finished mine off and tossed it in the trash outside our garage. My daughter still had nearly half of hers left and we didn't allow her to take them in the car. One too many Slurpees dumped in the seats, so I told her that she needed to hurry up and finish it or throw the rest out. So what does she do? Starts sucking on that straw like her life depends on it. At this moment I think to myself, she's going to get a brain freeze. Then the next thought that flashed into my head, for some brainless yet prankster minded reason, was, this is going to be hilarious. So at the moment I should have been warning her of the impending disaster, I instead chose to just egg it on with, come on, honey, hurry up, faster. Faster. Then suddenly she jerked the straw out of her mouth with a look of bewilderment on her face, clearly trying to process this weird growing feeling in her head, and then, tears. I suddenly felt like the shittiest piece of crap dad on the planet. That brain freeze hit and it hit hard. She was bawling at the top of her lungs and I scooped her up in my arms, held her head to my chest, tried desperately to console her while all the while just wanting to curl up and die for what I had just done. She's 18 now and I've confessed this story to her a few times now, but I think it's one of those daddy moments I'll never really forgive myself for. TLDR. I tricked my daughter into giving herself a horrible brain freeze. That's mean. BTW. Brain freeze is caused by the roof of your mouth being cold. Warm it up with your tongue and it will quickly go away. Edit. The daughter should put her own tongue on her own mouth roof. You filthy animals. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she frequently gives her students two choices when they are acting up. Egg, you can sit quietly during story time, or you can stay inside during recess. It acts as some kind of Jedi mind trick on them, and it doesn't even cross their mind to pick something that is not one of those two choices. It completely changes the whole conversation. They're no longer whining about X or Y, they are just thinking about which choice they want more or less. My father-in-law told his kids that when the ice cream van was playing music, it was because he was out of ice cream. That's seriously cold. When I was about 10 years and my sister 9 years old, my mum served up rabbit stew one night. Upon hearing it was rabbit, my sister refused to eat it. Mum made something else for dinner that night. A few nights later she served beef stew, which my sister happily ate. The game Sleeping Turtles. When the kids needed a nap, we would just break out a game of Sleeping Turtles. First turtle to wake up was the loser. Winner got to pick the next game. Also, I now play a game called Grandpa Sits and Drinks a Beer. In this game, the kids run up. I randomly assign them a role: airplane, dog, car, bird, or any number of scenarios. The kids then run around and act this out until they get tired of it, then come back to be reassigned. It keeps them running around and busy for hours, and I get to drink my beer in relative peace. It's like Whose Line Is It? For 4-year-old kids. Story from a friend of a friend. When her kids hit teenagerdom, this mother was forced to set a curfew time. When she sat her kids down and explained they needed to be home by 11 PM every night, They smirked at her, especially since she was an early to bed sort of person. That was when she showed them the alarm clock, set for curfew time. She would put it out when she went to bed, right outside her door. If it went off, she knew they weren't yet home since they hadn't turned the alarm off yet. Busted. Needless to say, there were some really amusing nights when she'd wake to hear frantic running footsteps up to her door, followed by the click of the alarm and a huge sigh of relief. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Like and subscribe you magnificent person.